So we'll discuss a little bit about the Meraglim, about the spies, about what motivated these great people, the Meraglim, to do such a terrible crime. In fact, we'll begin with the beginning of the parsha, where Rashi asks, what's the juxtaposition of the beginning of Parsha Shelach with the end of Bahaloscha? So Bahaloscha concludes with the incident of Miriam. And Miriam was punished for speaking Lashon Hara, evil gossip, about her brother Moshe. Of course, it wasn't malicious. She didn't know that Moshe Rabbeinu was different than all other prophets. In fact, Rabbi Chanan Wasserman points out, this is the source that we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was different than all other prophets. Nevertheless, Miriam was punished as she spoke Lashon Hara about her brother. So too, Rashi writes, the Meraglim, the spies, did not learn their lesson, and they spoke Lashon Hara, evil gossip, about Eretz Yisrael. So we know out of the 12 tribes, they each sent, the leaders of each of the tribes went out to be part of the mission. And we know that 10 came back with evil reports, and 2, Yehoshua and Kalev, came back with good reports. And the question is why? Why was it? What was it about Yehoshua? What was it about Kalev? Were they greater? Were they more ethical? What was so good about Kalev and Yehoshua? What was unique that they were able to come out with a good report in contrast to the other prophets, to the other leaders, Nesiim? So, and in fact, another question is, we find Moshe Rabbeinu praying for Yehoshua. You will no longer be called Hosea, but Yehoshua. They say from the Yud of Sarah. But Yehoshua, Moshe prayed for Yehoshua not to be influenced by the Atzas HaMeraglim, the advice, the suggestions of the spies. Why is Moshe playing favorites? Why was he only praying for Yehoshua, for Joshua? Why did he pray for all of them? Why not Kalev as well? So the Mefarshim point out, we have to go back. What was the motivation of the spies in the first place? They were great people. What led them to this terrible sin? So the Zohar tells us, and really it's subconscious, but they were all Nogea B'Dav. They all had a bias they didn't realize. Because the Zohar writes that deep down the Siyam knew through prophecy or divine inspiration that once the Jewish people enter Eretz Yisrael, it's going to be a new type of Hanhaga. It's a new type of leadership. That even though they're the leaders now in the desert, in the Midbar, but the Hanhaga of Eretz Yisrael is going to be different, as we all know. As the Ramban, Nachmanides, points out, that the Jews in the Midbar lived a supernatural existence. The Jews, when they entered Eretz Yisrael, lived a normal existence. But as the Ramban says, what's the difference between nature, Teva, and Nes and supernatural? Is we're all creatures of habit. Everything's a Nes. Whatever God does is a miracle. However, things that we're used to, we call a nature. Things that happen once in a while, we call a miracle. So, for instance, the Jews always had food fall from heaven and the water from Miriam's well. So when they were told that when you enter Eretz Yisrael, you're going to have to plant, and there's agricultural as what? From a little seed, grass is going to grow, a 50-foot tree is going to grow, food's going to grow. What a miracle, wow. But to us, it's just the opposite. We know that. But if we said food is going to fall from heaven, or we're going to get the drink from the Ananiah, the clouds of glory, going to protect us, that would be a miracle. So everything's a miracle. but it was a different type of relationship. That it was more of a Gilai Shechina, was open divine revelation, and through miracles. But in Eretz Yisrael, of course, the Shechina dwells in Eretz Yisrael, probably even more. But it was more through more natural derech hateva. So the Zohar writes that the Nesiim on their level, wasn't malicious intent, it was in the bias that they realized, or they thought, that they were no longer going to be their leaders, and therefore they were nogea b'davar. They were biased, and therefore, as we know, the Torah tells us you can't accept a bribe. That we know people, you can't take a bribe. We all know. People think a bribe is, if I say to the judge, here's $10,000, make sure I win the case. That's not a bribe, that's outright stealing. A bribe is you go to the judge and says, you know what, I've been following your history, I like the way you paskin shilos, you're very ethical, honest. You know what, I'm going to have a court case with you tomorrow. Here, take the $10,000, but I don't want this to affect our case at all. If you think I'm guilty, I'll go with it. You think I'm not guilty, please take this as a gift. The Torah says, no, you're no longer kosher to be a judge because you took a bribe. That's a bribe. A bribe blinds a person. And when you're blind, it doesn't help to look any closer. So therefore, they were nogeya, as the Gemara tells us in Gittin and other places, with, I think it was Rav Elish. He was in jail, and a bird came to him and said, Elish brach, Elish brach, Elish, run away, escape from jail. And he asked the person next to him, what did the bird say? And he said, Elish, you should run away. And the next day, he came back and he asked him again. So the Rabbi Kiva Eger asked, I don't get it. Elish was well versed in all the languages, like Shlomo, and even Sichos Ophos, whatever that means, bird talk. So why, if he understood bird talk, why is he asking the guy next to him, who's a criminal, what he's saying? And the answer is, as Rav Chaim Shmulevitz explains, the old adage, you hear what you want to hear, you see what you want to see. He was afraid, since he wanted to hear, Elish, escape, escape. So therefore he wanted to make sure he was nogea b'davar, he was biased, he had to make sure he got an objective opinion. And therefore that's where the Meraglim, the great people, erred, is because they didn't realize they had a bias, and therefore that led them to see Eretz Yisrael in a certain way. So why not Kalev? Why didn't Kalev have this bias? So the commentators explain because it was a win-win for Kalev. Because we know the Torah tells us, Yaakov tells us in Parshas Vayechi, Yasser Shevet MiYehuda. The Malchus, the kingship, is going to come from Yehuda. So Kalev knew right now he's a leader, and he knew eventually the kingship's going to come from him anyway. So therefore he wasn't nogea b'davar. So what about Yoshua? And why did Moshe Dafka have to pray for Yoshua and not for the other ones? Because the Mefarshim explain, because Yoshua, of all of them, had the best reason to make up a bad